Ben and Lola came out from Rolls-Royce, and who would think that the boy Lola punished in the morning who becomes her billionaire boss in the evening? The boy sat reclined on a plush leather chair, a gaming controller in hand. His expression morphed into shock as their eyes met. "You," they both said simultaneously. Recognition hit Lola like a thunderbolt. It was the same boy she had punished that morning, the latecomer. But here, in his domain, he was dressed in luxury and exuded an aura of authority far beyond his years. Lola said in her heart, "So the boy I punished in the morning was my billionaire boss. What will I do now?" He smirked, his earlier humiliation melting into smug satisfaction. "So, the senior prefect is my new maid? Interesting." It was the beginning of the school year at one of the most prestigious high schools in the city. A blend of excitement and anxiety filled the air as students reunited after the long holiday. The young lady, Lola, a diligent and intelligent senior prefect, was preparing herself for the challenges ahead. Lola had already achieved a lot, balancing her academic duties and leadership role with maturity beyond her years. But despite all her success, there was a weight on her heart. Her father had fallen gravely ill, and the medical bills were mounting. Her mother was too frail to work, leaving Lola with the heavy burden of finding a way to pay for the expensive treatment her father desperately needed. Her heart raced with worry, yet she kept a strong, unwavering facade, determined not to let anyone see her pain. Lola had always been the model student, never slacking on her responsibilities. But her life was about to change in the most unexpected way. The morning had begun like any other, with the buzz of students rushing to their classes. Lola stood by the school gates, watching over the entrance as the senior prefect, a position she held with immense pride. Her job was to ensure order, making sure no student wandered into class late. As the bell rang, signaling the start of the day, a young boy came rushing in from the school gates. He looked disheveled, his tie askew and his hair in disarray. Lola narrowed her eyes and glanced at her watch. He was late, and that was against the school rules. She marched up to him, her gaze firm but composed. "You're late, young man," she said sternly. "You're going to be punished for this." The boy, who appeared to be around her age, looked up at her with a mixture of frustration and confusion in his eyes. He didn't say a word, but Lola could tell he wasn't thrilled with the situation. He'd been caught. Without hesitation, Lola told him to stand outside the principal's office until the assembly began. It was a punishment reserved for the most serious offenses. As she walked away, Lola couldn't help but feel a little guilty. She had been known to be strict, and she knew this boy's punishment was a hard one. But the rules were the rules. She didn't know it yet, but the boy she had just punished was about to become a significant part of her life in a way she couldn't have possibly imagined. Later that afternoon, Lola received an unexpected phone call. She had been offered a job as a maid in a wealthy household. The pay was decent, and it would be enough to cover her father's hospital bills. Without hesitation, Lola accepted the offer, knowing it was her only option. She didn't question why she was chosen. Perhaps it was due to her diligence, or perhaps the household needed someone reliable. The job was at a grand mansion on the outskirts of the city, an area known for its wealthy residents. The sprawling estate stood tall, guarded by iron gates and well-maintained hedges. As Lola made her way to the mansion, she couldn't help but marvel at its sheer magnificence. She had never been inside a place like this before. A few hours into her duties, the front door opened with a loud creak, and Lola heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She quickly looked up from the dishes she was washing and froze when she saw the person who entered. Standing before her was the same young boy she had punished earlier that morning. Only now he was dressed in a sharp suit, looking every bit the part of a rich, powerful heir. His presence in the house was unmistakable. He stood tall, exuding an air of authority that contrasted with the confused, late student she had reprimanded earlier. His eyes locked with hers, and for a brief moment, Lola felt a wave of recognition. But then, it dawned on her. This was her new billionaire boss. The boy smiled, his lips curving into a playful grin as he took in her shocked expression. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "I'm sure you remember me from school." Lola stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what to say. This couldn't be the same boy, could it? The one she had disciplined, the one who had been late to school? He was now the son of the billionaire owner of this mansion. As the realization hit her, her face flushed with embarrassment. How could she have known? She had punished him without knowing who he was. She tried to compose herself, offering a polite bow. I didn't know it was you, she stammered, her words faltering under the weight of the situation. The young billionaire chuckled, clearly amused by her reaction. It's all right. You were just doing your job. But I must say, you seem to be a woman of principles. One who doesn't back down when it comes to rules, he said, his tone soft yet commanding. Lola could barely respond. The boy she had punished in school was now standing before her, rich beyond belief and the one person who could potentially change her life. He had everything she had ever dreamed of: wealth, power, and respect. And yet, he didn't seem angry or resentful toward her. Instead, there was a hint of admiration in his gaze. The billionaire's gaze lingered on Lola for a moment before he turned to leave, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Lola watched him go, her thoughts racing. What had just happened? Was this a coincidence? Or was there something more at play? Over the next few days, Lola's life at the mansion became a blur of chores, cooking, and cleaning. She barely had time to think about anything other than her work and her father's condition. But every time she crossed paths with her billionaire boss, her heart seemed to skip a beat. His presence was magnetic, and despite the gulf of wealth and status between them, there was an undeniable connection. As Lola continued with her duties, she began to notice something strange. Despite the group of girls at school who fawned over him, the young billionaire showed no interest in them. They were all beautiful and wealthy, yet he seemed indifferent to their advances. His attention, however, seemed to be drawn to Lola, the girl who had disciplined him for being late to school, the girl who worked tirelessly to support her family. Lola had noticed his quiet glances, the way he seemed to watch her when he thought no one was looking. She had even caught him smiling at her from time to time, a smile that seemed genuine rather than forced. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that he was simply being kind because she worked in his home. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something more was brewing. The group of girls at school who had once admired him were beginning to notice the shift. They whispered among themselves, speculating about the relationship between Lola and their billionaire classmate. Rumors started circulating that the two were closer than anyone had realized, and jealousy simmered beneath the surface. Lola, however, remained focused on her work. She wasn't interested in the gossip or the attention. She had enough on her plate with her father's illness. Yet, there was something about the billionaire that she couldn't resist. His quiet demeanor, the way he paid attention to the smallest details about her life, made her feel seen in ways no one else had. The atmosphere at the high school began to shift, particularly among the group of girls who had long adored the young billionaire, Ben. These girls were beautiful, wealthy, and used to getting whatever they wanted, but for the first time, they felt ignored. Ben, the boy who they thought would one day be their Prince Charming, had suddenly become distant and disinterested in them. His attention was now focused on Lola, the quiet, hard-working maid from the mansion. Ben's attention towards Lola was subtle but undeniable. It started with small gestures, asking her how her day was going when they crossed paths at the mansion, offering a smile when she did something particularly well. To the girls who had once hoped for his affection, this was a betrayal. They couldn't understand why he would be drawn to a simple, hard-working girl when they were the ones who had everything: beauty, wealth, and social status. The group of girls, once friends united by their shared interest in Ben, began to grow resentful of Lola. They couldn't fathom why he would pay attention to someone like her. In their eyes, Lola was nothing but a maid, someone who didn't belong in the world of high society where they thrived. The girls, feeling slighted and jealous, began plotting against Lola, determined to get her out of their way. The leader of the group, Tanya, was the first to voice her displeasure. She was the prettiest and the most popular girl in school, and she had always considered herself the center of attention. When she saw Ben's eyes linger on Lola, she was furious. She gathered her friends, all of whom shared her disdain for the girl who dared to steal the spotlight. Tonya's closest friends, Linda and Gozi, were just as furious. Linda was known for her sharp tongue and her ability to manipulate situations to her advantage, while Ngozi was the quiet one who always followed Tonya's lead. Together, the three of them formed a powerful clique, and they weren't about to let Lola ruin their chances with Ben. Tonya, Linda, and Ngozi weren't the only ones in the group, though. There were also two other girls who joined in on the bullying. Juliet, a beautiful but insecure girl, and Chioma, who always followed Tonya's lead but was too afraid to think for herself. Juliet's jealousy stemmed from seeing herself as the most likely candidate to win Ben's attention, and she could barely tolerate the fact that Lola was getting what she believed was rightfully hers. Chioma, on the other hand, simply went along with whatever Tonya told her to do, always eager to stay in the good graces of the group. The bullying started subtly. Tonya and her friends began to isolate Lola from the other staff in the house. They would make cutting remarks whenever they crossed paths with her, always in front of others so that Lola would feel humiliated. "Don't you think you're out of your league here?" Tonya would say with a mocking tone. "A maid like you doesn't belong in the same room as someone like Ben." At school, the bullying escalated. The girls would spread rumors about Lola, telling others that she had been trying to seduce Ben. They would whisper behind her back, claiming that she was just using her position to get closer to him, even though Lola never showed any interest in Ben beyond their brief encounters. The bullying didn't stop there. The group of girls began to make Lola's life miserable in every way they could think of. They would steal her things, hide her books, and play tricks on her during class. At lunch, they would sit at the table closest to her, laughing and gossiping loudly so she couldn't concentrate. If she tried to speak up, they would turn the tables, pretending to be the victims and accusing her of being rude. Lola tried to stay strong, ignoring the taunts and gossip. She had bigger concerns: her father's health, her studies, and the job that was keeping her afloat. But the emotional toll of the bullying was wearing her down. She was finding it harder to keep up with her duties at the mansion and stay focused in school. Ben, on the other hand, was completely oblivious to the bullying at first. He noticed the subtle tension in the air when he was around, but he couldn't quite figure out what was happening. He was too caught up in his own world, immersed in the responsibilities of being the heir to his family's billion-dollar empire. However, his feelings for Lola were undeniable. He admired her resilience, the way she handled everything with grace, and how she never let anyone see how much she was struggling. One afternoon, Ben caught wind of the bullying when he overheard Tonya and her group laughing about Lola. He was stunned. How could they treat her like that? He was no stranger to high school politics and understood how cruel girls could be, but this felt different. Lola wasn't like the other girls. They had no right to treat her this way. Angered by what he had overheard, Ben decided it was time to confront the girls. The next day, after school, he sought out Tonya and her clique, his presence looming over them like a storm. "What's going on, Tonya?" Ben asked coolly, his voice betraying a hint of anger. "I've been hearing things. Why are you all treating Lola like this?" Tonya, taken aback by Ben's directness, tried to deflect. "We're just having some fun, Ben. It's nothing personal." But her nervousness didn't go unnoticed. Ben's eyes narrowed. "I don't care if it's personal or not. Leave her alone. Lola doesn't deserve this kind of treatment." His words shocked Tonya, Linda, Ngozi, Juliet, and Chioma. They had always been able to control the situation, but now Ben was standing up to them. Tonya tried to salvage the situation by putting on a smile, but it was clear to Ben that their behavior had crossed a line. He didn't care about their feelings. He cared about what was right. And it was clear to him that Lola was being bullied for no reason other than jealousy. The following morning, the tension in the mansion was palpable. Lola had just finished her morning chores when she received a surprise. Ben, having noticed how hard she worked and how she had been struggling with the bullying at school, had made a bold decision. He approached her while she was tidying up the living room, his tone serious yet gentle. "Lola," he said, "I'll take you to school today. You don't have to worry about anything. Just get ready." Lola was taken aback. She hadn't expected such a gesture from Ben, especially considering her position as a maid in his household. "Ben, you don't have to," she started, but he raised his hand, cutting her off. "No, I insist. You've done so much for me. It's the least I can do. Please, allow me to take you to school today." Ben's words, though kind, felt like a dream to Lola. She had never imagined herself being treated with such kindness, especially not by someone of his social standing. After a brief moment of hesitation, she nodded. "Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it." Within moments, Ben was already calling for his driver to prepare his Rolls-Royce. The luxury car, gleaming in the early morning sun, was a symbol of everything Lola wasn't accustomed to: wealth, power, privilege. And yet, here she was, being asked to ride in it. She couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and discomfort. She had never been in a car like this before. When the car arrived, Ben was already in the back seat, waiting for Lola. She walked hesitantly toward the vehicle, her heart racing. As she got into the car, the driver opened the door for her, and Lola couldn't help but feel a wave of nervousness. The inside of the Rolls-Royce was like nothing she had ever seen before. Soft leather seats, plush interiors, and the smell of expensive perfume lingering in the air. As they began the drive to school, Lola sat quietly, still processing the situation. She had never imagined that Ben would do something like this for her. As the car glided smoothly down the road, she stole a glance at Ben, who was staring out of the window, deep in thought. He had a calm, collected air about him, but she could sense a certain warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. Ben glanced over at her and smiled. "You know, Lola, you deserve so much more than what you're getting right now," he said softly. "You're not just a maid. You're a hard-working, intelligent person. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words hit Lola deeply, and for the first time, she felt truly seen. As they neared the school, the reality of what was happening started to settle in for Lola. Ben, the billionaire's son, was taking her, a mere maid, to school in his Rolls-Royce. It was an act of kindness that felt like a fairy tale, and she wasn't sure if she should feel elated or out of place. Meanwhile, in the school, Tonya, Linda, Ngozi, Juliet, and Chioma were already at the school gates, waiting for the bell to ring. They were gossiping about the events of the previous day, about how Lola had been the center of attention, especially after Ben had spoken to her in front of them. As they stood by the entrance, their eyes locked onto the Rolls-Royce pulling into the school driveway. The car stopped just outside the gates, and Lola stepped out, followed by Ben. The girls' jaws dropped in shock. They had never seen anything like it before. Tonya was the first to react. "What is she doing here with him?" she hissed under her breath. "How dare he bring a maid like her to school in that car?" Linda and Ngozi shared Tonya's disbelief, but Juliet and Chioma remained silent, their expressions a mix of jealousy and confusion. Lola walked towards the school entrance, trying her best to keep her composure, but she could feel the eyes of the girls burning into her back. Ben, noticing their stares, gave them a cold glance before turning to Lola. "You'll be fine, just ignore them," he said reassuringly. Tonya, Linda, and Ngozi were furious. They had been vying for Ben's attention for so long, and now, not only was he completely ignoring them, but he was openly supporting Lola, the girl they despised. The humiliation of seeing Ben, the wealthy and powerful heir to a billion-dollar empire, treating Lola like she was someone special was too much to bear. "This is ridiculous," Tonya muttered, her face turning red with anger. "How could he bring her here like this? Does he really think she's worthy of this kind of treatment?" Her voice was thick with venom. "I told you she was nothing but trouble," Linda snapped, glaring at Lola. "She's always trying to get in the way. First, she punishes Ben, and now she's acting like she's his queen. We can't let this go. We need to do something about this," Ngozi said, her voice filled with spite. "If we let her get away with this, she'll think she can have everything. We can't let her have him." Tonya's eyes flickered with malice as she formulated a plan. "We'll make sure she regrets this. We can make her life even more miserable than before. Ben will see that she's just a maid and nothing more." The girls exchanged looks, their hatred for Lola growing stronger by the second. They couldn't understand why Ben had taken an interest in someone like her, and they were determined to tear Lola down, no matter the cost. Tanya's mind raced with ideas of how they could make Lola's life at school and in the mansion unbearable. As Lola and Ben walked toward the school gates, they were unaware of the storm brewing just behind them. Tanya and her clique were already planning their next move, and it would not be long before they put their plan into action.